Welcome back to Decoding the Faith. Today I want to look at the famous story of Jesus being tempted in the desert. So the story is pretty simple. Jesus has just been baptized in the Jordan River. The Holy Spirit's come down looking like a dove and entered into him. In one of the Gospels, it says the Spirit drove him into the desert like a man possessed. And here the Spirit has him fast for 40 days. Back in the first century, it was believed that evil spirits lived in deserts and desolate places, so it's no surprise that Jesus would encounter a demon here. Jesus is a combination of human being and God, so, like all of us, he's subject to physical desires and cravings. That's his human side. The question is whether this human side of him can withstand temptation, and if he can, how does he do it? After 40 days of successful fasting, the devil shows up. Here's a famous painting of the encounter. We see the famished Jesus sitting down, confronted by Satan. And there's 3 temptations Satan throws at him. The first is with hunger. Satan says, "You must be hungry. If you're the Son of God, tell this stone to become bread." Second temptation. Satan whisks Jesus up to the top of the temple in Jerusalem. This is where the Jews in the first century came from all over the Middle East to make sacrifices. Satan takes Christ to the top of the temple, which was pretty high, and he says, "If you're the Son of God, throw yourself down and angels will catch you." Temptation number 3. Jesus is taken to a high mountain and shown all of the world's kingdoms. Satan says, "If you're a son of God, I will give you control of all of these if only you will follow me." Each of these scenes is really rich in meaning, but today I want to focus on just the first one. Satan says, "Turn these stones into bread and satisfy your hunger." Satan's trying to trick Jesus by getting him to succumb to his most basic instincts, in this case, his hunger. Satan has a reputation for tempting people to act like animals. In art, the devil is often represented with horns, like in this painting, and he has webbed feet too. In other parts of the Bible, he's called the beast. It's no coincidence that in the Garden of Eden myth, it was an animal that tempted the first humans. They act on instinct, and they live to satisfy their cravings. But human beings are made for better things than just obeying our bellies. We've been given intelligence, language, and the ability to sense the spiritual dimension of life. So in the Eden story, the fall begins when we give in to hunger, at the prompting of an animal. We're given a choice. Do you want to stay like the animals, or do you want to try this human thing? That first temptation is the background to Christ's temptation in the desert. This painter has gone out of his way to show those echoes. Christ is tempted in a desert, but this desert looks a lot like a garden with trees and bushes. In fact, there's one very prominent tree on the devil's side, which is meant to remind us of the tree of good and evil, which prompted the fall of Adam and Eve. The devil's also holding a stone in his hand, as though he's offering it to Christ, like Eve offered the fruit to Adam. So this temptation story is a deliberate replay of the Garden of Eden. Jesus is being tempted, just as Adam and Eve were tempted. They gave in to physical craving. The question is, will the famished Jesus, who hasn't eaten for 40 days, will he give in too? Jesus knows that human beings are supposed to be able to resist immediate temptations. So Jesus says, "Man shall not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of God." Jesus is quoting a passage from the Hebrew Scriptures, also known as the Old Testament. Moses is talking to the Israelites just before they enter the Promised Land. Moses reminds them that God kept them in the desert for 40 years so they could be tested and humbled, to be sure they were ready to follow God. They need to remember that when they enter the Promised Land, any wealth they create there is not their own doing. Their riches and power come from God. So when Jesus quotes Moses, he's drawing a parallel between himself and the Israelites. They were in the desert for 40 years. Jesus has been in the desert for 40 days. They were tempted and tested. Now Jesus is being tempted and tested. Jesus reminds us that life isn't just about stuff, how much money, houses, clothes, or food we can have. God has chosen us humans to have access to God's wisdom. It's like the chance to understand the source code of the universe, God's own words. So Jesus reminds the devil, man shall not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of God. None of this makes any sense to the devil. He just wants Jesus to give in to his hunger, just give in to his physical cravings. And this painter has made the point in a really clever way. Remember that tree that's near Satan? Take a good look. It has no leaves anywhere close to Satan's body. But the trees beside Christ are full of leaves. Christ's way, God's way, is the source of life, this painter's saying. The source of life both biological and spiritual. In fact, if you look at the stones at Christ's feet, they look like they're turning into bread, just by being close to Christ. Unlike Adam and Eve, Christ doesn't fall for the devil's temptation of hunger. So the devil will try 2 more times, and I'll get to those temptations in a separate video. But thanks for watching today. Click on subscribe to get more of these videos, and check out our website to find my sermons online. Peace be with you all, and remember, you are so much more than the sum of your cravings.